Hello everyone, iZero here, and welcome to fourth Amiga Vibes show here on Slay Radio. Summer's here, according to calendar, short sleeves, things. The weather is almost like summer. It's been like this week it's been like 15 or something and some sun, and except yesterday it was raining pretty much all day, and this morning also cloudy and under 10 degrees, but now after afternoon it started to shine and getting there. But yeah, I'm also getting some summer cold or something. I woke up with a sore throat, and a couple of hours ago I think I started to lose my voice, so let's see how this goes. Yep, we started with BeeZerk, shuffled Hyperbase, Enigma Hyperbased, and we'll continue with Cirdan, Red Sector P. Cirdan with the red sector theme. Yeah, sorry about that. Yesterday it was the Schools Out Day here in Finland. The graduation parties and that kind of things. We went visiting the neighbors. Their daughter graduated from high school, and of course our teenagers got out of school with good grades also. Sorry, really getting some cold, obviously. So the teenagers are home now 2.5 months, so I have to figure out how to feed them also on the lunchtime. In the other news, I'm relearning other things again. This is the fourth show, and I think I've changed everything after each show. So that's why I need to spend some time to figure out what to press and push. I did some hardware updates. I bought this Stream Deck Mini second hand and configured it like 2 weeks ago, so now I don't remember what I did put there, but let's see. Alright, you can join the chat on Slated Radio / Discord. I think it was. And what else? I had something else in mind. But yeah, there's SDK, Goenks, Frida Katarina, Grisor, Coast Luna. So come to join the chat. Let's go to the requests. FS was the first requester tonight. Basically, another request coming later, which was actually first. But FS wanted to hear R-Type by Chris Hulsbeck, so I chose the remix by Chris Hammer. So this is Chris Hammer, R-Type title Hammer's remix. Chris Hammer with R-Type title Hammer's Remix. Yeah, speaking of hardware, Gohanks has apparently ordered or pre-ordered Ultimate 64 to Elite, and also two new cases, and yeah, transparent and black one. Yeah, I have been thinking also buying Ultimate 64. I have a few cases, and actually the working C64s, but I would like to have the red pin brown C-style case, and with the black or dark brown keyboard. I like the. I've seen some pics of that setup, and I think it looks nice. But yeah, in addition to the Stream Deck Mini, I also bought a small mixer, so now I have hooked up the Amiga 1200 also, so I can play the demos and also originals from that one. And the Amiga has a bit of cross-mix, so it's not so hard to your ears if you, especially if you're using headphones. Yep. Gohanks is the next requester. Wants to hear Apidya Meadows Edge 1-3 by Dimitris. So let's play that next.
Warning. Insect DNA detected. Initiating the transformation procedure. Transformation complete. Load your weapons and get ready to fight. were complete.
Dimitris, Apidya, Meadows, H1-3. It was requested by Cohengs. Yeah, I have still some hardware things to show or talk about. I've been building this one. Let's see if it focuses. Yeah, this is new replacement mouse joystick switcher to my 1200, which should support the CD32 controllers, and it has extra ports for mouse. Mouse is here, gamepad here, joystick. This is for the keyboard, yeah, and this is the second gamepad. Yeah, I have similar thing already integrated into the case, but I noticed that it's not detecting CD32 controllers. Well, of course, for the second part is just straight through connected, so it works, but yeah, I had to figure out the gates and things to get the correct signals go through, and then it switches the directions to the mouse or joystick or gamepad. So few jumpers and things to fix there still, and I think I need to make another version of the PCB, or just use much jump wires to get it work perfectly, because now it defaults the joystick, and I would like to default to mouse, obviously. Yeah, apparently Luna is at airport and traveling to Norway today, and tomorrow, was it Hungary? Something like that. Budapest, yeah. And well, I wanted to hear Nine Fingers Club Mix by DJ Skitz. So let's play that. DJ Skitz, Nine Fingers Club Mix. And that was requested by Luna. And Luna kind of reminded me to wish happy birthday to Rasmus, my brother's son. Has birthday today and turned to 1 year old. His aunt was also flying to Norway today, as we called him today, and his aunt was there getting ready to fly. Yeah, and that brings us also to the next request, because Zephyrin requested in the afternoon, stating that Hoffman has birthday today. I think he's turning 48 if I'm correct. So Zephyrin wanted to hear something from Hoffman. Not an Amiga remix, but anyway, let's find out Hoffman, and this is Wrecklamation. And let's figure out how to play this, because I didn't prepare, of course. So if I do this, here. And let's figure out why it's not playing anything. Okay. I have a button for this. Here. Nope, doesn't want to play. Let's see. Some debugging on live debugging. So I have that, and you can still hear me, yeah. And okay, I'm missing the. No, it's there. Okay, let's try this. Can you hear this now? Maybe. Yep, Hoffman Wrecklamation. Yeah, I figured out the problem, so you just had to watch me during the playback. But I think I got it working now also with the visuals. Just forgot to add one source to the correct visual or scene. Yeah, I prepared something meanwhile. And yeah, Cirdan and Siona are I think still at barbecue. So until this show, Cirdan has been there switching the YouTube switch on and off when the show starts and ends. The Twitch and Kick works automatically, but YouTube has been needing to turn on the stream manually, and the bed is not playing now, of course, because I forgot to put it on. Yeah. Next in line, I have a track by Peter.b, and it's called Steeve.b, Peter.w remix. Peter.w with Steeve.b. And now that we have had the first technical problems, let's continue with that. Hopefully not. But yeah, it's time for playing a demo. In the first, or actually first live show and the second show, I played the Spaceballs demo. That's from Norway. Last time I played Enigma Phenomenon. That's from Sweden, so I think it's time to play Finnish demo this time. So I have prepared demo by's Finnish department of Scoopex, and that's 7 scenes, and let's figure out how to put that on. No, think you can see the screen now. Yep. So here we go. Right, there was the boss fight. Yeah, bit repetitive to audio listener, audio only listeners at least. But yeah, let's continue with the remixes. Unknown user requested Peter Clarke with complications. And now I don't have that audio at all. Okay, more debugging. Okay, yeah, let's restart. No, not reeze. Peter Clarke with Complications from Encore 500 album, and it was requested by Uncom user. I think next I will try to play some original mod. I have the Zool 2 poster there, so let's play Neil Biggin's. Well, all that two tracks are from Neil Biggin, but this is from the Mount Isis level, and I just need to figure out the correct buttons again. There. That was Zool 2 Mount Isis levels track by Neil Biggin, and while I wasn't aware of the composer's name, and I was googling around and actually found Zool 2 album from the Apple Music, and it was interesting. It's by Neil Biggin, but it's totally different tracks, or almost totally different. There is some distance resemblance of the originals, and there is also a Lotus trilogy called album, and in there's also some familiar names for the tracks, but it's not like remixes or anything like that. So I have to listen more of those tracks. What's the idea behind that? And yeah, by the way, if you have requests, go to slater.radio/request. I do have a couple of lists. We have still like 45 minutes left. And join the chat on the Discord, slater.radio/Discord, and now there is a channel for the BitLive 2025. So if you're planning to go there or will go there, so join the chat to figure out the things there. Next I have a request by Luna. This is Cold Storage remix of Cream of the Earth by Romeo Knight. screenshot by Cold Storage. Yeah, I almost forgot to mention this. Well, this. Let's get the focus. Yeah, this is Finnish Amiga user group's magazine Saku. It comes from Suomen Amiga Suomen Amiga Käyttäjien Union. So yeah, Saku is a magazine which was established in 1993, and first numbers, at the beginning it was a diskette magazine, spread with floppies and so on, and later changed to a web magazine, and it was I think it was there was like 15 numbers made between 1993 to 2013, and last year it was a big surprise for us readers, I think for many, that Saku number 51 was released after 11 years. And yeah, this year they made a paper version of that number 51, so this is great. I think there's like 175 pages of Amiga stuff in Finnish, and there will be number 52 this year also. And so if you're a Finnish listener, you can get your Saku magazine paper version from let's see, I forgot to get that linked somewhere. There. So yeah, you can check where you can get your paper version of Saku from sakulehti.fi/paperi. So in Finnish, sakulehti.fi kautta paperi, and English, Saku magazine. Well, you don't want to probably need that for the English listeners. Yeah, actually I've written one article to some number of Saku. It was about my Amiga 1200 conversion to the first conversion, and I kind of almost promised that I will write an article about the latest conversion at some point. Let's see what we have in list. Screw up the windows. Yep. Next is a request by FS, and it's Space Harrier by Peter Clarke, and I don't have that lined up yet, so let's do that and that. Yep. Peter Clarke and Space Harrier.
Welcome to the fantasy zone. Get ready.
to the fantasy zone.
Space Harrier by Peter Clarke, and that was requested by FS. Yeah. Next up, I'm gonna play 2 tracks that I have chosen because I was wondering what the heck is happening. Was it this week? I was working and playing some Amiga remixes from my playlist, random, and noticed a very long silent moment, and why the volume went down, and then figured out that I had 2 tracks on the list. That first one has a very long fade out, and the next one has a very long fade in. So it was so nice feature that I will repeat that here. So let's start with let's see, Ghouls and Coasts by Psheiko. fading out, and we still have 40 seconds left. Yep, this is Psheiko's Coasts and Coasts. And still 15 seconds. 5. Yep, 10. And next one is a track by Binster coming to Chimerica Harlequin remix. Binster coming to Chimerica Harlequin remix. Some 17 minutes left. I think I have enough requests now to fill it up. Yeah. Next in line, I have a request by Luna again. And Luna wanted to hear War 2008 by John Hare, Markus, Klein, Andrew, Barnabas, and Richard Joseph. War 2008. That's of course from Canon Fodder, and we will hear more Canon Fodder later. And that was requested by Luna, who's at airport, or maybe already in plane. No, seems to be at IRC still. Next request is by GoHanks, and he wants to hear Kekko Yamori 2 electro rock remix. Zool Electro remix by Gecko Yamori, or something like that. Gohanks wrote that Zool and Lotus 3 were his favorite Amiga games, mostly because of the Patrick Phelan's music, and I have to agree. I really like that music and the games also. Gohanks also wrote that need to finish Zool one of these days. I did finish the game back then, and also Zool 2. But I think the CD32 version has one extra world, if I remember correctly, and I haven't really played that. So should check and play that through. Next we have a request by unknown requester. Request is for Robocop, the best of the both worlds remix by Agnatronic.
Get the best of both worlds. The fastest reflexes modern technology has to offer, onboard computer system memory, and a lifetime of on-the-street law enforcement programming. It is my great pleasure to present to you Robocop.
Serve the public trust, protect the innocent.
Agnatronic and Robocop, the Best of Both Worlds remix. I think we are coming to the end of the show. And we still have some voice left, but I had in mind. So I'm not sure when I'm going to do the next show. Not next week anyway. Maybe 2 weeks from here. But in the meantime, you can listen to Boss Radio on boss.radio. Tomorrow, Matt Ricardo. Tuesday, Cactus. Wednesday, Boss should be around, I think, back from England. And on Thursday, of course, Slaykon and Siona back here on Slay Radio, I think. I don't remember any Hungry Lights or more things like that, so they should be on live then. And for the next my show, I shall not modify the setup too much, so hopefully it will go better that way. Actually, I remembered I have a few buttons here that I haven't used since the first or the second show. Like I was planning to play this when it's time to go. And remember that
only Amiga makes it possible.
Yeah. So take care, and hopefully there is better summer, better there where you are. Like I said, there's more Cannon Fodder. We'll play at Winetown Tune, which is Cannon Fodder featuring Sunesis by Turbo Knight, and it's from album Encore 500. So thank you everyone for joining and requesting, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.